Russia is losing control. Mass unrest erupts inside the country as entire regions slip out of Moscow's grip and underground resistance turn into a re-election. The Kremlin is shaken, authorities cracking, and fear is spreading at the top. On the battlefield, Ukraine flips the rules of war. Aircraft destroyed, ships wiped out, and drones emerge as a lethal strike force rewriting the balance of power. Then, a shock in the heart of Moscow. A high-ranking Russian general is eliminated, sending a clear signal. Even the inner circle is no longer untouchable. Ukraine is not stopping. New drone production, deeper reach, and preparations for the next phase are already underway. Meanwhile, a surge of aid for Ukraine is leaving the enemy with no chance. Everything is changing fast. All the details in our special edition of Hotspot. Russia is being rocked from the inside. Bashkortostan is spiraling beyond Moscow's control as mass protests ignite across the region. The underground resistance is no longer hiding. Covert networks are escalating from rhetoric to real action. Inside the Kremlin, alarm bells are ringing as authority begins to sleep and calls for defiance grow impossible to suppress. What started as frustration is rapidly evolving into a direct challenge to Putin's rule. Is this the first deep fracture in the foundations of the Russian Empire? The full picture is coming up next.
Bashkortostan is protesting. In Russia's dictatorship, it's harder to manipulate its people, even domestically. The reason is, not long ago, Bashkortostan's cultural centers held an event for Bashkir Language Day. But Bashkirs decided to use this moment to protest. The posters featured anti-imperial rhetoric. Political prisoners were mentioned too.
The Republic of Bashkortostan, in this particular regard, and the national movement of the Bashkirs, it is probably, as of today, one of the most active movements within the territory of the Russian Federation.
On the official websites and social networks of clubs and libraries, posters, photos and texts in the Bashkir language were published. They stated that empires historically forced subjugated peoples to adopt the dominant language, thereby depriving them of political will and the ability to act in their own best interests.
Throughout history, numerous empires compelled subjugated peoples to adopt their own language, for they understood that a native tongue strengthens national identity and unity, and consequently makes it more difficult to forcefully impose an alien will and grants these peoples the ability to act in their own best interests. Those who sought to alter the language were also trying to transform the very fundamental essence of their people.
Also, a number of publications mention historical figures who fought for Bashkortostan's autonomy and independence.
The Bashkirs have always been known as excellent warriors. Bashkiria, I should remind you, has historically been presented and officially formulated by the Russian authorities as a voluntary accession of Bashkiria to the Russian state, what they call the Russian Empire. However, it's crucial to remember that all of this transpired through fire and sword.
Interestingly, sources from the Nemoskva resource in Bashkortostan are suggesting that this particular action is a prank, given that something similar has occurred previously. Specifically, at the end of November, memorial events were held in the Republic using the number 8,000.
State institutions at that time were publishing materials with the hashtag 8,000 heroes, claiming that Bashkortostan had lost more than 8,000 people during the war in Ukraine. However, the Republic's authorities did not officially announce such figures.
However, there is a much more serious threat for Russia. Recently, the Bashkir partisan movement has been actively growing and expanding.
I am Kodan. I represent the underground movement of the Bashkot Company. I am the voice of the Bashkir people, and I am ready to make myself heard. My ancestors fought for our freedom, and I am prepared to see this struggle through to the very end. Bashkiria shall be free. Join the Bashkot Company.
The number of members in this Bashkot company is rapidly growing. The Bashkot company itself is a military unit of Ukraine's International Territorial Defense Legion, formed by Bashkir volunteers in 2022. And now, new videos are appearing urging others to join their ranks.
Bashkirs, it is time for us to unite. The underground resistance is growing.
More and more Russian cities are adorned with inscriptions from the underground company.
The Russian regime of Vladimir Putin, it is making every conceivable effort to stifle these national liberation movements. And in fact, just take a look at the casualty figures, at the disproportionate losses among the various peoples who actually inhabit the Russian Federation. And you will see who is suffering the most today, from the deployment of these so-called fighters to the so-called special military operation. These are the minority peoples, including the Bashkirs, and this is being done, in my opinion, deliberately.
No one wants to die in a war against a foreign sovereign state, and this the Bashkort company understands like no other as it continues its struggle against the Kremlin's bloody dictatorship.
The disintegration of the Russian Federation, which is inevitable, just like for any empire. I'm not saying that this will happen tomorrow, but it will begin specifically from the so-called national territories.
And it appears they're quite determined to intensify this ongoing struggle, and for the Putin regime, these developments are extremely negative.
Destroyed military aircraft and 2 Russian vessels. This is the latest confirmed haul of Ukrainian drone operators. Recent strikes carried out by the armed forces of Ukraine demonstrate a sharp increase in effectiveness as Ukrainian defenders have mastered new operational tactics in drone warfare. This development signals a clear shift on the battlefield. Drones are no longer just support tools, but a decisive strike force capable of changing the balance of power. More details on the new tactics and their impact in our full military overview.
Ukrainian defenders continue to destroy the enemy not only on the front, but also in the rear.
Shooting! Get away!
Ukrainian Special Operations Forces employ their own unique tactics. They skillfully target Russian vessels in unexpected areas to confuse the adversary and prevent any possibility of reaction. In the Caspian Sea, the Proskazorosi Torparza, the patrol vessel Okotnik was due on the Kagazastiwok, which the Russians were utilizing for patrol duties, was successfully struck by just a few drones. This entire incident occurred in the vicinity of a drilling platform at the Filonovsky oil and gas field, which itself had also been targeted by a Ukrainian attack. While the Russian Ministry of Defense makes loud statements about shooting down targets, military facilities in the Russian Federation continue to burn. A large-scale fire broke out at the aggressor state's military airfield in the Lipetsk region. As a result of a successful sabotage operation, 2 expensive Su-30 and Su-27 combat aircraft of the Russian Federation were destroyed.
The Su-27, Su-27M, and Su-30 are modern aircraft, and that's why this particular site was selected, resulting in the destruction of 2 planes. That's the absolute minimum.
As it turned out, this was the work of Ukrainian intelligence services, and the operation itself was executed by a representative of the resistance movement. The routes of the patrols, their schedules, and the changing of the guards were thoroughly studied. They quietly entered the facility and struck the Sukhoi jets right inside the protective hangar.
Our intelligence is working very effectively. This means, for instance, we don't need to deploy our own groups. Contacts are established, they find sympathetic individuals, and then for specific objectives with specific funding, they carry out these types of operations. This means, and this leads to a reduction in the combat potential of Russian aviation, which is precisely what we need.
The estimated total cost of the 2 damaged fighter jets, which Russia had deployed in its attacks against Ukraine, could amount to as much as $100 million. Ukraine's SBU orchestrated an explosive night at the Belbek Air Base, located in Crimea. Several S-400 and Panzer S-2 radar stations have been destroyed.
As soon as we obtained long-range strike capabilities, the Russians began to experience a shortage of anti-aircraft missile systems. They first removed aviation from Crimea several years ago, and then they returned again. That is, they initially established an air defense system, a rather dense one, and began to cover the Kerch Bridge with air defense. Naturally, these are mainly deployed on airfield sites, and Belbek in particular is primarily used for the placement of radars and anti-aircraft missile systems. Additionally, a significant part of their Air Force tactical aviation is almost fully deployed there, along with Army aviation. They're deploying them there for specific tasks, especially for intercepting our drones. That's where Army aviation and helicopters are deployed, among other assets. Helicopter crews are fully utilized for cover missions, at least against drones, but from missiles, they naturally cannot take cover.
Also in Sevastopol, 2 more Su-27 fighter jets were struck, along with the air traffic control tower. This successful operation will make it much harder to manage flights for the occupation army. One of these aircraft was already prepared for immediate takeoff.
They now fully realize that we are getting to their airfields, and I believe they will eventually, after losing, say, a dozen aircraft in a few months, once again pull their aviation from Crimea, moving it to mainland Russia.
At least 5 explosions were reported in the Krasnodar region. Residents heard the hum of drone engines overhead and saw bright flashes. After a series of explosions, authorities reported a fire on the pipeline. Prior to this, Russia's Ministry of Defense claimed the alleged successful downing of 35 drones.
Manipulator.
The Taman seaport is actively operating within the Volna settlement. In Taman, there are operational terminals for the transshipment of petroleum products and liquefied hydrocarbon gas.
On the village of Volna, located in the Temryuk district, due to an attack by unmanned aerial vehicles, 2 berths and 2 ships sustained significant damage. This information comes from the operational headquarters of Krasnodar Krai.
Authorities of the Russian Federation stated that the fires broke out at the berths and the fire covered an area of 1 to 1,500 square meters. A series of explosions was heard near the oil refinery in Slavyansk on Kuban, which had already been attacked a couple of days prior. Ukrainian defenders are doing everything possible to inflict the greatest possible damage on the aggressor's army. They are assisted by resistance within enemy territory, which effectively opposes the Putin regime and wishes to stop the war.
In Moscow, a car carrying Lieutenant General Fanil Sarvarov, head of the Operational Training Directorate of Russia's General Staff, was blown up, killing him on the spot. The explosion occurred in the heart of the Russian capital, sending shockwaves through the military and political establishment. Sarvarov was a senior figure directly involved in planning and overseeing operational training for Russian armed forces, making the strike especially significant. Further details on how the attack was carried out, who may be behind it, and what consequences it could have for the Kremlin in our full report.
In Moscow, a car exploded again. This time, karma caught up with Lieutenant General Fanil Sarvarov, the head of the Operational Training Department of the Russian Armed Forces, who, besides Ukraine, also fought in Chechnya, Ossetia and Syria.
The investigation is currently exploring various theories regarding the murder. One of these theories involves the crimes organization by Ukrainian intelligence agencies.
The elimination of war criminals on their own soil is now a common occurrence. In April, General Yaroslav Moskali, deputy head of the General Staff's main operational directorate, study died in a car explosion in Balashika near Moscow.
The Russian Federation is actively making efforts for further stabilization of the situation and providing assistance in the fight against international terrorist groups on the territory of the state. And in
May, in Stavropol, a veteran of the so-called Special Military Operation, Zaur Gurtiev, was blown up. It was he who commanded the missile bombardments of Mariupol, including the drama theater where dozens of children were killed, and for this he received government awards.
Where the bomb will fall, where the missile will fly. That's what we're engaged in. I consider my greatest accomplishment that during combat missions, I relied first and foremost on my people. I treated them as if they were my own family, and I did everything to ensure they remained safe and healthy. I don't even have a single wounded, let alone any killed.
Another war criminal has gone to Kobzon's concert. In October, Shuar eliminated Omon Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Mazurin, who was involved in war crimes in Bucha. And of course, how can we not mention the head of the Radiation, Chemical and Biological Defense Forces, General Combat Mosquitoes Kirillov, who was eliminated in an explosion in Moscow.
According to the description, the drone must deliver a container to a specified area and release it. When biting, mosquitoes are capable of infecting servicemen with a dangerous infection, for example, such as malaria.
Also, in temporarily occupied Donetsk, the car of Sergei Yevshukov, former director of Olenivka Penal Colony, guilty of killing Ukrainian prisoners of war, was blown up.
The Kiev neo-Nazi regime continues to commit war crimes, acts of terrorism against our country and its peaceful citizens.
In the Bryansk region, Dmitry Golenkov, the chief of staff of a Russian aviation squadron, was killed. He was involved in missile strikes on a shopping center in Kremenchuk and a residential building in Dnipro.
I wanted to wish you health, all the very best, and all the good things in life.
But the story isn't solely about military affairs. In Moscow, the deputy chief designer of the Mars Bureau, Mikhail Shatsky, was tragically gunned down. He was responsible for modernizing X-59 cruise missiles and for developing brand new drones.
Well, there's a very small chance that something will fall on you, but if nothing is done in the future, of course it could happen.
Such a number of successful operations proves that the Russian elite doesn't care about its enforcers, and no Russian war criminal will be safe even on their own territory.
If you want peace, prepare for war. And Ukraine is preparing not only to repel enemy attacks in 2026, but also to strike deep into Russian territory. In particular, Ukraine and Norway will open a joint drone production line in 2026. And that's far from the only bad news for the enemy. Our journalists have more. Watch now.
A new level and scale. Ukraine and Norway have reached an agreement on collaboration in the field of unmanned aerial vehicle production. The corresponding agreement was signed by the Ukrainian side with the Norwegian Minister of Defense. Denis Shmyhal emphasized that this cooperation will become an important stage in expanding Ukraine's production capabilities and strengthening the country's defense capacity. The top priority is the rapid deployment of an experimental production line as early as 2026.
We are gaining access not only to production facilities, but also to the technologies of NATO countries. This also means the opportunity for cooperation in the production of Ukrainian drones and, accordingly, the exchange of experience, as well as in the practical use of Ukrainian interceptor drones. Both strike drones and accordingly they're scaling up.
A similar model of cooperation is also being implemented with the United Kingdom. A few days ago, Kyiv signed a licensing agreement for large-scale production of Octopus interceptor drones at British facilities.
This is an exclusively Ukrainian development, and it already has real-world application in combat conditions. This drone can operate both at night and it is effective against electronic warfare systems, and notably, this drone can operate at low altitudes.
The manufactured interceptor drones will be delivered to Ukraine to strengthen its defense against Russian UAVs. The Octopus project is being implemented as a joint defense industrial initiative. The United Kingdom has obtained a license for mass production of the Ukrainian interceptor, and Ukraine will receive them to enhance its own interception capabilities.
The recently signed agreement comprehensively provides for the extensive production of several thousand crucial interceptor drones for the pressing needs of Ukraine's defense forces, specifically at various specialized enterprises located within the United Kingdom, which effectively eliminates any possibility for the Russian side to successfully destroy the vital defense plants actively manufacturing this essential product.
3 manufacturers have already received the necessary technologies to produce the Octopus drones. Another 11 companies are preparing production lines for them. After the start of Russia's full-scale aggression in 2022, the United Kingdom became one of Ukraine's main partners. London is providing powerful military assistance. In addition, the United Kingdom is actively promoting sanctions pressure on Russia and providing financial support to Kyiv.
The United Kingdom is a pioneer when it comes to practical implementation of so-called coalitions. Drone coalitions, naval coalitions, strike capability coalitions, and accordingly it was the United Kingdom that delivered the first heavy weaponry to the Ukrainian side. In particular, we're talking about the Challenger 2 tank. Only after the corresponding actions by the United Kingdom did the United States deliver its Abrams tanks to the Ukrainian side.
There are also plans in Ukraine to create robotic strongpoints, which will be equipped with combat modules to counter Russian occupiers. First and foremost,
we are talking about the logistics component, meaning ground robots. They will take on the main part of logistics, reducing to zero the losses of personnel and, accordingly, equipment of the defense forces of Ukraine. This refers to the delivery of ammunition and, accordingly, the evacuation of the wounded. Additionally, these are engineering functions such as mining and demining areas.
Earlier, Ukraine, together with the United States, began producing drone interceptors capable of countering Russian strike UAVs. Additionally, the Dutch government will provide €250 million for the purchase of American weapons for Ukraine under the PRL program. In particular, anti-aircraft missiles for F-16s and ammunition, which Kyiv needs most, will be purchased in the United States.
Britain, France and Germany are pressuring the United States to secure a fair peace in Ukraine. At the same time, the US Senate, along with ordinary Americans, stands with Ukraine. How the world is uniting around Ukraine and in the fight against Russian aggression is the focus of our next report.
We've made a promise and we have delivered on it. The European Union will cover Ukraine's urgent financial needs for the years 2026 and 2027.
Europe continues to provide support to Ukraine financially, politically and diplomatically.
Yes, we want this war to end as soon as possible, but an agreement reached by major powers without Ukraine's consent and without the Europeans' consent will not form the basis for a truly lasting peace in Ukraine.
This crucial assistance remains one of the most significant factors in the ongoing confrontation with Russia. However, not every single European country is quite so willing to offer such support.
The war has been decided. The Russians have won. That is a settled matter. The real question is when we will come to terms with the Russians and who exactly will be doing the negotiating.
Nevertheless, Europe is not standing idly by and often conducts negotiations with the American side, pushing hard for the Ukrainian version of the peace plan.
Indeed, they reached a new level because both Trump, Ukraine, and essentially the whole world were in such a certain expectation. At the moment, the European Union became a subject, and the decision itself to provide Ukraine with 90 billion euros for the next 2 years is one of the signals in principle of the European Union's maturation and its readiness to take on some responsibility.
On December 21st, a new round of negotiations took place in Miami involving Ukraine and the US. However, Ukraine's partners, including Germany, Britain, and France, were also present.
If we are to speak about the very last phase of the negotiation process, then only recently have the Europeans joined it to its full extent. A Europe which offers substantial and tangible financial support to Ukraine feels it has the right to also demand a place at the negotiating table. The position of France, Britain, and Germany not only strengthens Ukraine's understanding of potential maneuvers within these talks, but at the same time it consolidates the pan-European stance.
And meanwhile, Trump is still hoping that Putin will finally come to his senses.
We do not consider ourselves responsible for the deaths of people because we did not start this war.
The majority of ordinary Americans are in favor of providing support to Ukraine, and the US Senate has actually approved $800 million in military assistance for a period of 2 years and would have done even more than that if it were not for one crucial detail.
Support in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, it does exist, but at the same time, the American Congress's capabilities today are somewhat restricted. Well, let's say, to put it in a Ukrainian way, by Trump's one-man rule. And the voices that are being heard, including Senator Lindsey Graham, who co-authored the proposed bill for secondary sanctions targeting the Russian Federation, and his fellow colleague, Senator Blumenthal, a Democrat. These individuals are consistently promoting the Ukrainian narrative, but as of yet, they have not received the green light from the White House administration.
For the very first time since the commencement of negotiations, Ukraine has managed to push through its own conditions for a peace plan. The document enshrines robust security guarantees, the preservation of its own armed forces, and the presence of an international contingent.
Especially considering the palpable pressure that was exerted by the White House on Ukraine and the strong desire to sign a peace deal at any cost, this track has now reached a more qualitative and productive level from the perspective of Ukraine and our allies, specifically to formulate a common point of view between Ukraine, Europe, and the United States. This very factor will be the determining one in just how effectively Ukraine will be able to continue its defense against the Russian aggression, which the Kremlin dictator, by all visible indications, has no plans whatsoever to bring to an end.
These results were made possible through Ukraine's close cooperation with its European partners, who are helping Kyiv to confidently uphold its conditions 100% de course.
The stance taken by Brussels is in many respects absolutely crucial for Ukraine because, considering, let's be very direct here, the frequently anti-Ukrainian position that we often hear from Trump, it is the collective voice of the Europeans that truly stands as a significant and reinforcing factor in the broader context of advocating for the Ukrainian point of view, specifically within the ongoing peace process.
Ukraine has not been left to face this war on its own. The unwavering support from nearly all of Europe and other crucial countries allows Kyiv not only to effectively counter Russia, but also to confidently present its own demands.
At this moment, that's all from me, Maria Farafonova. Even more hellish frontline news in our next episode. But for now, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.